Hello, everyone. I'm Paris Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership with Tom Fox, hosted by Richard Lummis.
What makes a great leader? Is it genetic, or can you learn leadership skills? Join Tom Fox and Richard Lummis in this podcast, where they consider leadership from a wide variety of perspectives: academic, behavioral science, history, popular culture, the movies, and much more. You'll learn about specific tactics and strategies that you can bring to your own leadership toolkit. 12 O'Clock High is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
In this episode, I visit with Rod Robertson. Rod is the managing partner at Briggs Capital. We talk about some of the interesting developments in the M&A world during the pandemic and Rod's thoughts on leadership for Millennials and GenZers with baby boomers. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and today I have with me Rod Robertson. Rod has a really interesting business background, and he has some interesting thoughts, I think, on how people our age deal with millennials in the workforce. So, Rod, first of all, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Hey, I've been looking forward to it.
Could you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Sure. Hey, I was one of those people that, in dealing with so many different generations, I always had a hard time finding a job. I never really fit in. It just seemed like my personality was a little bigger, and I thought I knew more than my bosses. So my 20s were a trial and error situation, and my family and friends were in despair. People were cutting me off because I was just an out-of-the-box thinker. And, and gradually, not knowing it, I was moving toward the world of entrepreneurship and to thought leadership and to people with bigger and stronger opinions in smaller sized businesses. So I ended up, taking a winding path to business ownership over the years, owned a couple different businesses. Bought my first business. It was a pet supply company, and because I love dogs, so I bought it and built it up to $10 million and sold it. And then I jumped into a tech company that tanked, and then I did another one that did pretty good. So I was one win, one loss, one draw as a business owner, and that was a lot of fun. All three of them.
So for our studio audience, it's quite small, and this is an audio podcast. So I'm going to have to just stop here because Rod is the first person I have ever interviewed who has Gibbon's The Complete Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire on his bookshelf.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the greatest series ever written on history. Mm-hmm. So I have to congratulate you on that. And that, in my mind, qualifies you for about everything.
That's a great series.
Yeah, it really is. And literally, you're the only person I've ever seen have that up on your bookshelf. So obviously, I'm a big fan. But that aside, could you tell us what your current role is at Briggs Capital?
Sure. So for the last 20 years, I've been the managing partner of a small investment bank called Briggs Capital. And what we do is we represent entrepreneurs, people that want to buy businesses, families that want to sell businesses, people that need to raise cash for their businesses, domestically and abroad. So 70% of our business is, in the United States, and 30% ranges around the world. And I have 70% of my fun around the world, and with the 30% business I do there. But, I just have a great affinity. I've been to over, 55 countries, and I spend a lot of time there and written some books, collaborating with Spanish and people from Belarus. I just had a new book come out that's done very well. And, so I am like to think myself of a man of the world, and I probably dealt with over, a good 1,000 entrepreneurs in their quest to buy businesses. I've probably captained 100 transactions for entrepreneurs in all sorts of different phases and countries. So I'm deep into fulfilling other people's dreams and having their dreams come true and getting after it. And you meet the most fascinating people in entrepreneurship.
Briggs Capital, your company, and one of your partners, Stuart Robles, were recognized by Axial for a, quote, no-show, end quote, transaction during COVID. I found that fascinating. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what is a no-show transaction and how did you guys come up with it, mother being necessity of invention or some other reason?
It's we were one of the first people to do it, but it's happening everywhere. And we're on our third one now, deal where we never meet the buyer. We never meet the seller, and the buyer and seller never meet, and they buy a business without even touching or being at the business. Everything is done through Zoom, no personal meetings. And at first it was just hard to get your hands around it and get a grip on it that people would do it, but it's happening all the time now. And over 50% of those smaller businesses that are done out of, where it's not a direct geographic correlation, are doing businesses. A lot of them are being done without anyone ever meeting anyone. It's pretty incredible. But I used to spend before 50% of my time, traversing the states and overseas. But now, the lockdown where everyone's finding out and everyone's accepting the new norm of doing business like this call and getting out there and finding different ways to make sure that the bricks and mortars are there if you need it, and everything else is just flying through the internet.
There really was a reason that I called out your 6-volume Gibbon set, and then now listening to you, one of the things that occurs to me is you're inherently curious. And as you talked about your businesses that you've had and the people you've dealt with at Briggs Capital, would that be a fair assessment of you?
Yes, I mean, curiosity kills the cat, and I've been killed past my 9 lives, and I've been I could say I've been in so many different positions that other people don't want to be in, and, on my own or with other people in business and also in big adventures overseas. So, I have a big ranch down in Panama now where the people are wrestling our cattle because the virus is so strong down there. They're just taking our cattle. I'm involved. I'm in the World Trade Center in Kyiv, Ukraine, and we're having troubles over there. So I don't think Americans really understand the trouble that is cascading around the world and how lucky we are here to have the largest of our government just spilling maybe too much money on everyone from top to bottom. And there'll be a price to be paid for this, but right now, America is looking great compared to the rest of the world.
So let me ask you about SPACs. Many of the listeners of this podcast are in the compliance space, and they are struggling with how to deal with SPACs because they're a little bit different than an M&A, a traditional M&A deal. And so I was wondering, from your perspective, as someone who puts buyers and sellers together, have SPACs changed your business model, your approach, or is it just a different way to do a transaction?
Well, SPACs are such a unique animal, and they've been around for a long time, but now they've gotten sexy with everyone. And, but most of it is really an insider's game. When you're out there with the SPAC, you're putting your money in. It's a great deal if you're with the right people that are doing the right thing and they know what they're doing. But as an investor, you're putting your money, say you put $1 million into a SPAC, and you're going to get 14% interest on it. You should, at a minimum. And it can sit there for 2 years. You don't know what everyone's going to buy. So with this SPAC, you're sitting there, your money's inside this company, along with everyone else's. The owners of the SPAC are out hunting for a business, and you don't know what they're going to come up with. They have certain expertise that they're hunting for, and that's why you're comfortable to go with these guys and gals. But now they're out there, and they're finding a company. They find it, and they say, we want to buy this company using this pile of money that you all put in here and make it public so that we can trade in and out of it. So then you go ahead and you vote, am I in or am I out? You can retreat or you go ahead with the group. And there people are making spectacular fines and monies doing this right now. And I just had some wealthy friends of mine call me up the other day, and these guys are really been around Wall Street a long time, and they're big fish, and I'm a little fish. And they're like, "Hey, Rod, you know what? We just put in $10 million into a SPAC. Do you want us to cut in?" I like, guys, I don't know much about it. They said, "Well, we think you should put in a couple $100,000 at least, and ride along with us." And I said, "Well, I don't know a lot about SPACs." They said, "Well, they're hot," and they gave me the sort of the rundown I just gave you, and. So you know what? I'm going to be a riverboat gambler. I'll put in $250 to see where it's going to go and hope for the best. And they're telling me that you get your money out at the end if they don't go ahead.
So let me change the focus a little bit. And you've alluded to this a little bit earlier when you talked about your love of dogs. I share that same love. But you've used the phrase dependence of the pandemic. Can you tell us what you meant by that?
Yes, I mean, the world of dogs and their place in the workplace. Most people don't take their cats to work, but people want to take their animals. And everyone that was locked up over the last year, there's been a huge surge in the purchase of dogs and cats. The cats can, fend for themselves a day at home, but the dogs, they're a different animal. And, what are the people going to do? It's like having a baby. You're going to go there and you're going to be fighting over Gen Z and millennials, the best of the best workers that everyone's moving to and focusing to because of the pivot of technology. And all of a sudden they have young pups. And if they're working at home and you're trying to drag them into the office like it used to be, it's not going to happen. Because a lot of these people are going to say, I want to find a company that respects my relationship with my dog. And I can bring my dog in, or I can work at home with my pet. So owners, it was almost like a laughable oddity before. But now over 50% of ownership now is making special arrangements for pets. And before, the average person took 185 square feet of space in an urban setting for workspace. Now it's up to 300 because of the new spacing. So there's room to bring the dogs to work, and it's very, very healthy too. So owners are adjusting to it. They better, because they're going to lose a lot of the best and the brightest, and it's going to be a real tug of war between who's going to get the people, and the final lever between competing companies are going to be how you're going to treat my pooch.
When I read this story about you, the first thing that struck me after it was clear of your love for dogs was that this was incredibly important to Gen Zers and Millennials, if I can use the phrase younger people. But it also indicated to me that you have to perhaps manage Gen Z and Millennials different than you and I were managed when we were that age. And I was wondering, this lesson about bringing dogs to work, does that teach us anything about managing Gen Zs and Millennials, or is it something different?
I think it teaches that you really can't manage them in a traditional way from the old world. And what's the old world? 5 years ago is like before the Roman Empire. And to me, and to all the different people in the publications and the public speaking I do, this whole post-pandemic world and the pivot to technology is driving people over 50 years old to the exit if they don't switch to technology. And, all the firms ad nauseum, we've heard about all the businesses that are going out and this and that. But you know what? The big pivot's going on, fueled by the government. And, the more technology there is, the better. And, there's a phrase I coined, I'm sure other people too, but it's called reverse mentorship of the people over 45 who, and just picking that as an arbitrary date, that aren't as technology driven as the young people. And we should let these young people mentor us in their ways in their life, because they're going to be the ones that are going to see us out the door eventually. And we want it to be on our own time and not and be forced out.
I was on a Zoom call where someone talked about reverse mentorship inside their corporation, and they did exactly that, except they reversed it so that the younger Millennials and Gen Zs were actually mentoring senior executives on precisely the issues they talked about. So I really found that a fascinating concept and something that we, as in you and I, should certainly listen to. Goldman Sachs has been in the news recently. And they were in the news because a group of employees either leaked or somehow got out a PowerPoint presentation about the hours they work per week. And it was 100 hours per week. I grew up in a big law firm as a young professional. And although I didn't work 100-hour weeks, I worked 80 and 70-hour weeks. I'm sure in your profession, you've also worked long hours as well. And my experience was that's just the way it is. And everyone accepted it. And so when I read that story, I thought about my experience, and I would never have had the courage to say something's not right here. go along to get along or whatever it was. But what does that story tell us about managing millennials and then the reputational damage a company can sustain by abusing its employees in such a manner?
Everyone is so careful now of the optics of how they're viewed, and any series of blogs, any series of critiquing of a company could just crush it for the next round because everyone's watching. So the companies, I think, are becoming much more pragmatic, the big giants. But how many people really are working on those big Wall Street outfits? I think this new post-pandemic world is allowing the younger generations to carve out the way that they want to work. They're saying now a third of the people will go back to work as it was before. A third will be 50-50, and a third are going to work from home. But the people that are working from home full-time all the time, they got to be a little concerned, because if you're out of sight and out of mind and the bosses are from the old school, the people that are hoofing it into work are going to have a leg up on you when the economy starts, not doing so well that people are predicting next year. So it's not always good to be outside of the work environment, but certain flexibilities there. But these draconian 100-hour weeks, I think will be unsustainable, except for the people that want to be lashed to the mast like that.
Change the focus a little bit and ask, has the past year, the coronavirus health crisis and the pandemic, changed the way you or Briggs Capital has done business?
Everything's changed. And yes, deals are getting done, like we talked about, out of sight, out of mind. But there has been a paralysis of deals too. Our deal flow is down about 50% because everyone's numbers were down. So if people are valuing their business on the net profit of a company, say your company has a $1 million bottom line and the owner was looking to get 6 times that, or $6 million, and half the bottom went away this last 8 months, then your value of your company slips. So no one's selling. The companies are flooded artificially and bloated with PPP money. So there's this weird paralysis going on out there where the market's taking this artificial turn of downturn, but glutted with money. And then, of course, there's all the employees that don't want to come back to work. I was just at a board meeting where a guy has 50 employees that were millennials and everyone else, and they're all collecting unemployment, and they don't want to come back to work. He opened up his doors, 40,000 square foot, and they all balked at coming back because most of them are collecting, and they just didn't want to get back in there. These are for the people making sub 50,000.
Looking down the road, sort of 2025 and even beyond, what do you see that companies and more particularly business leaders need to think about regarding the management of Gen Zs and Millennials and whatever the next group may be called?
The gap between senior managers, say we're talking about like my daughters and son, they all work in tech companies, work in boiler rooms right now, selling. They do best with the bosses that are in their 30s and not in their 50s or 60s. There's just too much of a gap now, and technology is splitting, and the difference. The Gen Zs, the 21 to 24 year olds are so much more advanced in technology than the millennials at around the age 30. There's a totally different paradigm about adaptation to technology. And they all know it. So if you're 35 and older, you've really got to get in the groove of technology, or you're going to lose the ear of your audience that you're managing.
Ron, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I was wondering if any of our listeners wanted any more information on the topics you've discussed here in this podcast. Where could they go?
Sure. If you want to take a look at some of my books, or you can check out my website. It's called briggscapital.com. And I welcome any inquiries or anything. I've met great people across America over the last year out there speaking. And any way I can shed some light, I like coaching and teaching at this, besides creating wealth for people as well.
Ron, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to visit with me. This has been a fascinating episode. And so I hope that we may be able to continue the conversation in the future.
Very good. You know where to find me.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I hope you enjoyed this episode of 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership. Also, check out the article that the podcast is based upon in the show notes. Please join us again for our next episode where Richard Lummis and I will take another look at leadership. 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership, is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio.